Hello, I'm Margaret Turner. I'm here in Adelaide with Veggie Vision, and today I have Wendy Jane Shepherd back with me, and we're continuing her series on her animal paintings. Welcome, Wendy Jane.
Hello, Margaret. And my new series, this series is a little bit different than we looked at before. We looked at before was my paintings about factory farmed animals and cows, and we looked at them as whole animals rather than bits and pieces. Well, this series is taking a little bit of a different slant. I've always been concerned about the welfare of our companion animals, particularly dogs, because I have a particular dog at home who was rescued from the animal welfare, and he had a lot of issues and now he's got a lovely home. But I also think about all the other dogs there are, and sometimes we see dogs as very, very familiar to us. In art, it's always had a problem that particularly in the early 19th century, late 18th century, there was a lot of paintings about domestic animals, whether it be dogs or horses, but particularly dogs had the problem. There were very romantic images and very sentimental images made of dogs. What this made the viewer think about is dogs in a way that never thought about the dogs themselves. We become very familiar, over-familiar with the dogs we're looking at, the paintings. With my paintings, I'm making them unfamiliar. To unfamiliarise something, I've taken a different approach. I've actually painted sections of dogs, particularly I've used Sonny as my model, and he was very sick of me taking photographs of him all the time. But he was very patient in the end. But I've actually taken sections of the dog, and sometimes people don't recognise these paintings as being sections of a dog at all. Sometimes people have thought them of being other animals, but it's made people think. It's jolting people out of the familiar. So
show us while you're talking. Let's have a look.
Yes, well actually this painting and this painting are from one series where I looked at the human shadow falling over as well. There's actually a part of the shadow, so there's a kind of joining together to talk about animals that have been in our lives and affect our lives as much as we affect their lives. And this here, I'm looking at the smoothness of the surface too. On this particular series, I was looking at the idea of taking it to something of a meditative quality to it. The painting itself suggests thinking about and being meditative about. The other painting here in this series, I tried something a little different. The textured surface in the background, I tried to make this an overall feel of texture. So it's actually quite the opposite feeling to it. I was trying to say, to bring this further forward, maybe not to be as a distraction. But in this experimentation, both the familiar things about both of these paintings, these three paintings, I've taken sections of the animal, of Sonny. This is actually a section of his tail, I think it was. But it's something that we think about dogs in a different way. The other thing, remember we talked about the idea of the touch and the textured surface.
This feels more textured than these. This one here.
This one's from a later series. I developed quite an interesting technique to make it even more textured. However, the texture's quite rough. Whereas the cows, being a later series, I developed a kind of a smooth approach that feels very, very smooth. But again, if we can remember, talking about the other series, I was talking about Emmanuel Levinas, the philosopher, who was interested in post-humanist ethics, and he was talking about the idea of moving closer and the touch. And domestic dogs, or dogs, we tend to think about petting them and stroking them, but sometimes we take it, it's all too familiar to us, and we pet them without really thinking about what we're actually saying and what we're actually doing, the touch. Many dogs enjoy touching and being stroked, but sometimes we don't really think about that connection that we're actually making and how important that connection is. So in some ways, my paintings are hopefully jolting the viewer to think something a little bit different about animals, jolting them out of the familiar. In our society, we get very much multiple images given to us in multiple ways, from TV to all sorts of media. Also other visual artists will do different kinds of images. But by painting and doing something a little different, painting can actually become far more expressive and personal, and hopefully the viewer will take on that and consider animals in a little bit different way. Anyway, That's just a little bit more about my series, but it's something I really want to continue on because it means a lot to me to be able to express my concern for animal welfare through my visual art. Thank you again, Margaret.
Thank you. It's very, very interesting.
Thank you.
I'm Margaret Turner for Veggie Vision in Adelaide.